meeting to order.
I left this for Kim today.
Item 4, the appointments has been removed from the agenda, being as the person who was going to be appointed no longer is available. And if there's anybody interested in sitting on the Junction City Housing Authority Board, please let staff know. And should we all stand for a moment of silence and pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now we'll move into public comments, and the commission requests that comments be limited to a maximum of 5 minutes. So if you have any comments, approach the podium and state your name and address.
Larry Ruiz, 1906 McFarland. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. First off, I want to publicly apologize for some of the statements and the things that was made at the last meeting. I was totally out of order. I ask your forgiveness. And also that I was ill prepared. The declarant documents was inadvertently left in the vehicle. So I'm working on those and would appreciate another chance to present that to the commission. On a separate note, our meeting with the company out of St. Louis went well for this proposal to Fort Riley that's being prepared. An unsolicited proposal. There's been other companies, renewable energy companies, that approached Fort Riley, but none of them have ever come up with a plan or even wrote a letter to the general, the colonel, or PW, or any of the program people up there. We were the first to actually approach them and make good progress. And at this last forum with Senator Pat Roberts, I'm pleased to say that he was very happy with our plan. I'm in contact with his office. We spoke to some extent about the project. We have his support. The meeting in St. Louis went very well. The MPA has been signed. It's the first of its kind in probably the history of the United States, and it's with the largest renewable energy company in the world. They have some black marks against them, but they're only a $33 billion company, too. They have investors of about 3,000. Their net worth of their investors around the world is about $87 trillion. So the proposal that we're bringing to Fort Riley is being prepared as I speak. In a couple weeks, I've got a meeting in Phoenix with some of the program people. And verbally, we got their approval. The ink isn't dried yet on the MPA. That still has to go through Washington, but accordingly, they do get approved. Sometimes it takes time. But as I had mentioned earlier, and I know I got 5 minutes, that will come to fruition eventually. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
My name is Jim Schmidt, 7331 McDowell Creek Road. Mayor Ryan, Councilman, I'm here tonight. My wife Sarah and I are partners in Double KS Farms. We have a 3-year lease on the city's Elmdale property, and we're here tonight as part of the Geary County Cover Crop Group to ask the council's permission. We're working in partnership with Kansas State University on some cover crop research, and we have a need to maximize the results of our research to do some temporary livestock grazing, some research-based, very intensive, and I believe you all received a document via email yesterday about that. We're here tonight as a group. Scott Miller, Jorgen Beck are part of the group. Dr. Deanne Presley from Kansas State University is here, and of course Tom and Susan from their support with EDC. So we'd like to take any questions or any comments or thoughts y'all may have what it might take to be able to do some type of intensive program, short term, probably week or less, twice a year, to try and maximize the results of this because of the benefits it'll have not only within our county but also regionally because of the importance that cover crops are bringing on from an ag sector. So,
am I correct? This has to do about some
It's leased,
rezoning?
farmland leased at Elmdale. It's approximately 12 acres that the city owns, and we leased it out. And it was very specific in the lease. That crops only, and it's not zoned for cattle or livestock. And so in order to even get there, you would have to do rezoning. And in addition to that, that would be liability risks if you're willing to take that on or require additional insurance or lots of things like that. So it's not just an easy fix.
Can we get this put on a regular agenda so we can talk about it and address
I
it
would
thoroughly?
suggest that it be put
Think-
on a
I think it
regular
sounds like there's
agenda,
some-
because the first I heard of it was when I walked in tonight.
'Cause I think there's some questions. I know I got this morning, had a little bit of chance to look at it.
sure.
Several questions, but maybe we can get this put on an agenda and get some more information.
Yes.
Be happy
We'll
to.
give you a copy of the lease because it's very specific in the lease that it was for crops only. In the animal control, it's not allowed at all. And then under zoning, it's allowed for over 5 acres, but it's certain conditions and it has to be in an RS residential area, suburban residential area. And this area is a PDD district. It doesn't even qualify under zoning.
Wouldn't this first go through the planning and zoning?
If
the
we allowed
property-
by the lease, but the lease doesn't even, our lease with him doesn't even allow it.
No, but if you were inclined to amend the lease to permit, some temporary whatever with all the appropriate protections for the city, the property would still have to be rezoned, which does have to go through the planning commission.
Correct. So it would not be just an easy fix.
And one of our members, Brandon Dibben, is on the MPC, and he'd be willing to take that on if it comes to that step. From a liability standpoint, we've spoken with the neighboring properties, which would be the landfill group and also the storage units group, which is where we would have neighboring fences with. They're all open to it, very willing to work with us, and then we would put up what would in fact be a temporary fence, but it would be set up from a containment standpoint, either a netting or a barbed wire that we would understand would go in under our cost. We would remove it under our cost at the end of the lease. So, and yes, do understand that it doesn't specifically state that in the lease, but what has evolved within this cover crop research, and Dr. Presley can speak to this, but it's of critical importance from a standpoint of crop insurance and a whole lot of things that they're looking for a lot of data on. Regionally, we don't have that data, and this is a fantastic location, not only to do the research on, but also do other things like field days, bringing people in from around the region to review this and understand what we're doing and some of the recommendations that we have based on our research. So,
Sounds good. I just think it probably just need to be put on a regular agenda so we
Good
can
project.
And that'll give us time to take a look and cut the codes and stuff, because barbed wire fencing, I don't think is allowed
No, it's
No,
inside the
barb is not
city.
allowed.
then I believe netting's also one of the options too, right, Scott? Yep. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
Good evening. It's been a while since I've been here, so you must be doing something good. I spoke to you before you had your budget meetings. Oh, again, I'm Deborah Johnston, 1320 McFarland. And I was hoping that you would cut across the board on expenses with departments. And also the golf course, the opera house, and the airport all need to stand on their own. I do not do anything with these groups. So why should my tax dollars be used for those items? Also, you have under consideration ordinance tonight G1152 about the installation of equipment and where they plan to install their equipment. My question is, would this impose any unnecessary cost to existing utilities in the right-of-way of existing companies that already are in the right-of-way?
No,
And my understanding is no.
no.
My understanding and no are two different things.
No, the answer is no.
Okay, make sure that gets in the minutes. The other one, ordinance G1153, that you're wanting to grant a franchise to operate in Junction City. And I was curious to know what type of franchise fee is being come back to the city.
Well, that item will be discussed later, and the franchise fee will be discussed. It's stated in the ordinance, so if you had read it, you would.
I read it, but I'm also making sure people understand that when you charge a franchise fee, and that goes with Sprint, AT&T, Cox Communications, your utility bills, those companies can go from 1% to 5% that they offer to a city. This city has maxed all of our franchise fees. And what that is, and a lot of people don't understand it, that money comes right back like a kickback to the city for allowing them to do business in town. So that's why I had that question.
When we discuss that item, we'll discuss what the franchise fee is.
Well, if we approve it, and then you're talking about the franchise fee later, because you want to do the
Franchise
ordinance
fee-
first.
No. The franchise fee is established by the ordinance. So when that item is under discussion.
I'll be
or
here.
it's
Thank you very
approved,
much.
The franchise fee will be discussed.
And the other thing, a lot of people have been saying that the commissioners, none of you have made payroll on it, you all are government employees or a contract. Your contract's out of Topeka, right?
To provide service.
Right, absolutely, and that's great. But what I'm saying is that you're more like community organizers trying to, and you haven't met payroll. And I know with the government that, at the end of September, you want to spend a bunch of money because you're allowed to spend that money by 1 October. And a lot of people don't, well, you can shake your head. This is what I'm telling you that the people are saying, okay? And if you want a list, I'd be more than happier to do another petition. Thank you very much.
It's just not true.
Are there any other comments? Seeing no other takers, we will start with the consent agenda.
In reviewing the commission minutes from the last meeting, I goofed up. I should not have voted in the matter regarding the
Subordination agreement,
coordination agreement with
Millennium.
with Millennium Bank. I do own stock in that bank in excess of $5,000, so I should not have done that. And I just flat forgot, to be honest with you. I forgot that I even had stock in there. I don't go to any meetings or do any paperwork or anything, and I should not have done that. So I'm publicly acknowledging that, and it's my mistake.
And your vote didn't make any difference in the outcome in any of
So anyway, I just want to acknowledge that. So,
I did have one question. It's the fuel service, is that working for us? Is that showing a profit or a loss by the way that we're fueling now?
The WEX card system?
Yes.
Well, what it does is we no longer pay the 8 cents administration fee that the county was charging. The prices are about the same as what the county was charging per gallon in the end. Plus, when we pay the bill within 10 days, we'll get a 1% discount. And that's what all the advantages were, and that's why we switched over to the WEX card system. Plus, at the year end, because we're tracking now per vehicle on the gas, all of our off-road vehicles, we'll be able to qualify and apply for a refund from the Kansas gas tax and get that back, which we weren't able to do before through the county system.
Okay.
So it's not really a question of is there a profit or anything. It's just that it was a smarter way to purchase gas because of the price was going to end up being less.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And it's all done through the state contract.
I had a question on the pool, internet services. We have that ongoing for security, is that correct?
No. I believe you asked that question before, and that is an agreement that we did with, is it Cox?
It's with Cox.
Cox Communications,
Oh,
that we would
okay.
pay for that for so many years.
It's a yearly rate.
It's a
Okay.
yearly rate, and once that goes away, then we would have the ability to control that cost.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've asked that before too.
Yes.
I knew we had talked about it, but
Believe me, we won't pay beyond what the agreement says, on what we have to pay. So we'll have better control over that. But that was the agreement we made with them in order to get the line to that facility at no cost to the city at that time.
I think Cox Communication had an infrastructure cost that
Yes.
That they
they waived up front, kind of.
forego.
Okay.
And
Basically, we're paying in installments.
okay. On page 22, we replaced duty weapons. Did we purchase the same amount? I saw two, I believe it's 2 or 3 purchases. That's on page 22.
Chief Brown, could you answer whether you purchased the same number of weapons? You purchased duty
duty
weapons?
You talking about the Glock?
Yes.
The 23.
Yes, he is.
We bought 55.
Okay.
That was it.
I saw 2 purchases on there, and there was a smaller one, then a larger one. So was that the?
There was a hand, I think what you might be seeing there, sir, is the trade-in that we did with the 65 or 68
As a trade-in
that we
was
traded
after.
in.
Yes.
We traded in 68, I think, or so. They gave us a $16,000 credit.
Correct.
Yes.
And then there was a $5,000 difference, I think, that we ended up paying out, $5,100, I think. So we outfitted our entire department with new weapons for $5,100.
Good deal.
And our weapons have been bought in 2007, so they were 7 years old. And they were we had the Generation 3 Glocks, and we bought the Generation 4, which have different capabilities a little bit that the old ones did.
Yeah.
So that was all drug money.
Good.
And so we were really glad to replace those. And again, those are tools. And so it was, we felt at this time a necessity, and we had the ability to do so. And again, we traded in about 68 and bought 55 new ones. So there wasn't any, if you look at the receipts, it may look like we bought 2, but what it is one shows a credit, the other one shows the value of the project total, and then what we owed in difference, I believe, which turned out to be $5,100, I think.
Okay. Yeah, it's 4,000 and 18,000.
Yeah, we were missing some magazines,
Okay.
or clips for you ex-military folks, and some gun
magazines.
boxes from over the years, we'd lost some gun boxes.
Okay.
Magazines had broke or had just been lost. And so we had about another $1,000 and that we had to make up. So I think the total for us was around $5,100 total.
Is that enough weapons?
Yes.
We turned in 68.
Absolutely.
and
We've got 47 sworn.
Okay.
So that leaves us an extra 7. So that outfitted our medics
One
for our
breaks.
SWAT team. And so, yeah, we're good.
I want to make sure I have one when I come over.
Well, they keep a few, if one
Keep
breaks,
a few
it
extra in
goes
case we have a break.
a break, and then they swap them out for repairs and things like that.
All right. Thank you.
At one
Chief.
time, we had 54 officers, so that's why we had 68 that we traded in. So we've
Okay.
only got 47 now, so. That
Gotta
was
be
cut
right.
in 2009.
All right. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it.
I'm going to make one comment. Remember, I had reported to you guys that we were now giving you the report 2 ways, broke down by department and broke down in check order.
Yes.
The mayor found a check missing. He was actually looking at the report. So I wanted to report to you that check number 250545 was a payroll check that they had to cut manually because there was an error in the payroll. They cut it manually. It was for $159.01 to Gordon Doyle. What is going to happen for us to catch those, if they do a manual check like that, is right now Cindy has to give you a report from AP, accounts payable. She has to give you a report separately from utilities for the utility refund. Now she's going to add to that if they cut a manual check out of Human Resources Department, that they'll have to tell her so that she remembers to pull that, because ENCODE is not a user-friendly program, and you have to find those reports from all 3 different areas. Now she knows to look for it, and didn't know to look for it before. She will look for it, and if they cut a check manually out of HR, then they will have to tell her to pull that up so that you're not missing a number on the report we give you. And that's something that occurred, and I want to let you know that. You will see that at the next, on the next meeting, because they did have to do another manual check. Our new HR director is learning. So the very first payroll she did was the time that we had to change all the benefit structures for the new renewal dates. And so we were trying to teach her and do renewals at the same time, so she's finding errors. So that's, you'll see again on the next one, where there'll be a separate HR report with one check on it. Okay.
I like that report.
Yeah, that's, we did discover we're going to have to bite the bullet to hire Encode to produce the report that the auditors want to give you on HR. We have tried multiple different ways to figure out how to get the information from Encode, and we can't, without having to manually do it each and every payroll, and that was going to be extremely time consuming. So we're going to bite the bullet and pay for Encode to produce the report. And what that'll be is a breakdown of the amount, not just the gross amount of salary paid out to each employee for each department, with the benefits that we pay, not the benefits that they contribute to, just the benefits, what we pay out to them, so that you can see what every employee is earning with benefits that we pay out.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as outlined. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion?
None here.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it, 5-0. Next item on our agenda is a public hearing. This will be the hearing on the 2015 budget. And the public hearing is open.
Scott Johnson, 702 Stone Ridge Drive. Just have a couple comments on the budget. I almost wasn't going to come because I think a lot of people are getting the idea it really doesn't do any good to voice your opinion anymore. And then I read where the county commissioners were saying they were kind of mad that only 2 people showed up to speak. And so I figured, well, I may as well give it one more try tonight. But I think before you pass this budget, I think we need token cuts every single year and no increases. The county, which is talking about over a 7 mil increase, that's about $160-70 per 200,000 value of a residential house. It's about $350 on a commercial building. And then when you're talking about all the other increases on stormwater and everything, and you see all the vacant buildings around town, I think you need to cut. And I think the way to do it is for you guys to have a real sit down with that county commissioners and get this thing down to a net decrease. Because there are, I don't know if you guys see it, but I see it every day. There are people leaving town, a lot of them, and they're looking for other places to retire. They're looking for other places to start businesses. A lot of rental property that's vacant, a lot of stuff going on in the market, and you've got to turn this around with cuts, not increases. I don't understand how anybody's buying the bonds that trade every day from this city or issue new bonds. Because you can buy, municipal bonds on cities all over that don't have anywhere near the per capita debt these do. And they're in growing towns, not in towns where the biggest employers talking about leaving. And not bonds that are backed by worthless ravines and lots that you can't sell. So, and I buy municipal bonds, and you can look at cities and tell a healthy one and one that's not. And this isn't a healthy city financially. You've got to make cuts. It'd be great for everybody to get raises every year, but you can't do that. A 7 mil increase on the part of that county, 3 people who basically his only job is being a county commissioner, and they don't have to do anything but sit there, all day Monday and raise our taxes. You've got to get together with them in the next week or so before this budget's passed and make some serious cuts. Just a token, $500,000 apiece, but we can't have these raises because I don't know what's going to happen. But if Fort Riley is probably going to slow down. That's what you hear on the national news. Nobody's beating the door down here to start businesses. The taxes are very high. And the deal is, maybe to you and me, it doesn't matter if your taxes go up $200-300 a year, but to a whole bunch of people it does. That's $200 or $300 they don't have to spend and put back into this economy. And it's making a big difference. I see a lot of people think, well, they're mad because of the high debt, so they think they're going to show Junction City by shopping in Manhattan. That doesn't do us any good at all when people have that attitude, but they get that attitude when they don't think they're being listened to. I mean, I don't see a whole big crowd here tonight to talk about these taxes. 13% voter turnout, which is pathetic. Maybe we're glad the other 80%, 7% didn't vote. I don't know what's even going through their minds. But the fact, I don't think it's that nobody cares about the taxes. I think they're just apathetic and threw up their hands and say, what's the point of coming down here and, even talking to you guys? But anyway, that's my point. I think you need to get with that. I hear the school district they get a lot of government money, so they're not under the same constraints. They may cut a mill or so, I heard. $6-7 million increase is ridiculous. So, I think you guys are talking about a 0.56 or something like that. You should have a token cut for sure and get on those county commissioners and tell them, no, you can't do that. So that's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Deborah Johnston, 1320 McFarland, and that when we lose troops on post, and they're not going to have vacancies on post, those soldiers are going to be told to live on post. They already have a hotel that's hurting the community, and now they're going to have an Applebee's. So, it's not going to bring the money into Junction City. And if the Army wants to put that Applebee's on post, I hope they do. Because they're doing it for the soldier. They're not doing it for what are we going to get out of it.
Are there any other comments? Then I would close the public hearing. And we'll move into new business. Consideration of the 2015 budget.
Mayor and Commissioners, there were three main goals that we discussed early on in the budget process that the City Commission was directing us to do and staff members to meet. We were to maintain services. We were to be fiscally responsible for providing quality services, protect infrastructure, and address the capital needs without increasing the mill levy, and to provide additional general fund money for the street maintenance. I'm here to state that the 2015 budget presented to you meets all of those goals. This has been thoroughly vetted through multiple meetings with you, and I recommend the adoption of the budget, placing it at 47.667 mills for the City of Junction City as presented.
I think there's been a lot of work that has gone into the budget this year. I'd like to see a little more. I would like to see, and I know that the department heads have worked very hard at trying to hold the line, as well as the city manager trying to hold the line, and we have held that line relatively well. There are some things that I think going forward we need to look at. They may be nickels and dimes on the grand scheme of things, but there are things that we need to look at. Again, there was a lot of work that was done on it. There was a lot of conversation. I'm pleased with the glide path that you've established. When you look back, into 2009 and going forward, there's a glide path. And it's clear that the city has tried to hold the line. There is some spending that may be subject, that other people maybe not know everything that goes into it. But I commend you for working hard and staying at that line in the sand. And I know that some people don't think that we're holding that line very well, but in totality, and for what has happened over the course of the last 5 years, when you look at the numbers, it has been a success.
The numbers tell the story. In addition to, we use your guidance, where your goals and your priorities are. And we looked at the community survey that was completed, and what the people wanted. They wanted good police protection, they wanted good ambulance service and fire service, and they wanted good streets. The main goal this year was all the departments other departments took cuts so that we could transfer money into streets, more money into streets, and that was the goal that we went after. The other departments knew that, and that we worked as a team to make that happen.
And it shows.
We have a good team right now.
You've done a good job on the budget this year.
My team has done a good
Your
job.
team has. You coach well.
We've got a great team right now. We really do.
And given the state that Junction City is in, to be able to still provide a certain amount of services and stuff and be able to hold the line, and at least with some of the folks I talk to, actually nobody wants their taxes or their mill to go up. But I think that at least the people I talk to are fairly satisfied with the services that they're getting for the dollar. So
good. In addition, we actually increased the blight services that you had requested, and made improvements so that we could start making the city more beautiful in the long run, for it to be attractive for outsiders to come in. And that plays right into what we're going to do with land banking and everything else. Everybody working together, economic development. And we did get a major employer come here this year, so we are making progress.
I want to say a couple of things, and we've done some improvements. The staff, the city staff, the commissioners, everyone that lives and works in this community, first off, I want to say I read everything that comes to me, no matter how opposed it is. I read it to give it consideration. I think we did a good job on our budget. I feel we did a good job. There's some things that we'd like to have seen, but by removing some of those things, for instance, the health department, putting that funding back where it should have been with the county, or where majority of the county is already doing it, back in the county, it took the burden off the city, but it didn't take that charge away from the health department. And the health department has to be funded, and that health department's going to be funded by the people that was initially supposed to be intended for, and that's the county. So we took it off the city, which looks good, but it's still there, and it gets added back in the county, so everyone pays its portion. We have to look at a couple things. We want to make sure our city is attractive, and our city is attractive, and it's becoming better and nicer than it has been for the past few years. Our streets are better. Our law enforcement's better. Our police and fire are able to respond to emergencies better and quicker, which also increases your insurance, or correction, it decreases your insurance by the ability for our emergency services to respond. If they were not able to respond, it would impact you by your insurances being higher and your mortgages being higher because of the insurance required for those. One thing I would like to say, though, and we haven't explained it yet, but we're just getting reports in on our juvenile activity. We have increased in negative juvenile activity, just short of doubling it. We want to take away services. We want to take away things for the kids to do. It costs money to put those kids in the juvenile detention center over there. There's 3 levels that we can go to, but we're only able to fund, even at the state, the first and the third level. The second would be really nice, but we've taken that expense away from the county and from the district that we're in, and we only have two resources for a juvenile when they get in trouble, and that's expensive, either way. It takes a community to develop a child and a child to develop a community, but we have to find a way to find out what's impacting these kids to where they're getting in so much trouble. And like I said, it's just short of doubled this summer from what it was last summer. And they have the pools, they have Spin City, we have 12th Street, we have more activities here. We have an a tournament-winning baseball team, and those resources were all out there and they were great. I think if we start and we continue to take away, I will tell you, we have our eyes on Fort Riley. And I've had my eyes on Fort Riley for 15 years or more. We were trying to get a Chili's. It's never changed. We had a Chili's on the book, and that's what we were trying to get, and it never happened. There's a reason that we couldn't get it in Junction City, but they can get it on Fort Riley. This is demographics. Our demographics will not support any large establishment that's a chain-type restaurant. The ones that are in town, they're taking chances, and they're proving to the public, those people that are far away from here, that Junction City is a place that you can go to. The city demographics don't support it, but they know there's people to the north that do come into Junction City, and the people that are away from here come here. So we're bringing the folks in. Our numbers still continue to climb. Fort Riley has the demographics. If they get it, that's good, but if they lose a brigade, their demographics will go down, and they'll do whatever they can to keep that. And if it's on Fort Riley, that tax base is still in Geary County, I believe, isn't it? And they should still have to pay taxes.
No,
Federal government does.
it's a federal government when there's no taxes.
Well, and the hotels that they had on post, we needed those over 20 years ago because the ones that we had were so far inept to keep any VIPs there. They're still not able to keep VIPs there. They have one little hotel which houses the people who are in transit. Those folks still stay in the local community and in the lakes. So I want to tell you that, yeah, those things are here. I was there for 3 years running those operations and quality of life on Fort Riley. I am quite familiar, and I stay quite familiar with what goes on in Fort Riley. Those soldiers may go down, but they'll go back to what they were before. We've made it in 1990. We have a focus on what's happening in the near future, and I think we're prepared, and we're preparing for what the outcome may be on Fort Riley if the numbers decrease. I want to say there's some things that we have to give it roughly 2 to 3 years, but I think you'll see Junction City grow astronomically to continue to be one of the fastest moving micro or mini communities. Micropolitan city in the nation because of what's going to happen. Not everybody wants to be in Manhattan. And we talked at the leadership conference, the 3 things that our 3 communities have, and they're not all the same: Manhattan, Wamego, and Junction City. And we do work better together in these last 2 to 3 years than we've ever worked before. So that's my point on the budget. I think we did as best as we can. Our city manager strives and stresses that we have to stay vigilant on keeping the budget down. Just because you have it doesn't mean that you have to spend it, but we have it in case of an emergency. And if we don't use it, we bank it for the next time. Thank you, city manager.
Yep.
And your staff.
I would like to see the mill levy lower than last year. I think with what the county's facing, I think we have to figure out a way to work with these guys. I mean, I wish we would have known what they were projecting back in June. Fortunately, we didn't. But I'm very concerned about it. I mean, we got 3 taxing entities, and people get hit from all sides. And I know that our city really has kept their mill levy flat, and I realize that a couple hundredths, is not a lot of change, but if the other entity is looking at substantial increases, I think there's some things that they could do to mirror us with what our staff pays on their health insurance. I wish they would consider that, among other things. But I'd like us to look around and see if there's anything else we could live without. But that's my 2 cents. I think the staff has done a good job. There's a lot to consider, and you listened to us when we asked you to find more money for the streets, and you did a great job. I am concerned with what's going on north of here and with what the other taxing entity is for the county, what they're looking at. I'm very concerned about that. So I know it's just a budget and you don't have to spend it, but I think we need to keep that in mind.
Yes, it would have been nice if we would have known or had some inkling that they were looking at those types of increases. My only concern is, do we hurt ourselves by some of the things that we need to do and not knowing, I guess, what they really are looking at in terms of trying to reduce their budget. Maybe that's where we can maybe reach out and try to have some conversation to see, I guess, where it is they're looking at, offer some suggestions if that's possible. But I mean, I don't know, where they're at, how far off they are, to that being a reality. That information hasn't been shared with us. But I think one of the concerns that at least I would have is that we go make some cuts, but then does that let them off the hook of not looking as deep as they maybe need to look?
Tough choices.
Yep.
City Manager, I have a question.
Yes.
If we approve this budget tonight, is it a requirement that we take in all of this? Or do we take in what we need?
You're
once we
setting the
spend it?
mill levy
Correct.
tonight by accepting if you accept what's presented in front of you, you set the mill levy. That goes to the city, to the county clerk, and that's what determines the tax bill.
Okay. That's all right, okay,
Yeah. I'm required to have it to her no later than August 25th.
exactly.
I've never tried it, but I've been told that the world doesn't come to an end if I don't get it to her by the 25th, but I like to meet my deadlines.
As much work as went into this budget, if we're going to cut anything, every other department has cut their budgets to funnel money into the streets department. So if we reduce our mill levy any, then we're not going to get near as much work done on streets.
Right. Well, and I gave you a list of 3 or 4 pages of revenue ideas as well as expenditure reductions. It is beyond that. It's up to you to decide what you want to do. And the department have presented to you what they think is their bottom line, and based on the goals that they had presented to you and what they wanted to achieve for the next year. Each budget acts as a miniature goal setting with you. The broader picture we get from you, and then beyond that, then you need to tell us the direction you want to go with the budget. We recognize as staff that we have to toe the line. We recognize that we don't wildly spend just because the money's there. We recognize that we have goals to reach that you give us, and we will achieve them as best we can with the funds that we're given. You have to remember that most departments took cuts, but at the same time, when we went through the crisis in 2010 and 11, we had severe cuts, and we recovered a little bit by adding a few part-time people back in based on the severe cuts then, because we needed to achieve the goals that you gave us. And you couldn't do that with no staff.
And in your
There
last,
have been some positions added back.
and in, I don't know if it's in your last weekly report or, anyway, there is profits being made, profits being shown at Spin City, and there's also profits being shown, greater profits than the year before at the golf course. And that's one of the things that, instead of breaking even, they're making a little bit more income. Well, I won't say they're breaking even, but they have more income coming than that same period last year.
I'm not comfortable saying that for every quarter that's true, but they attempt
3 months.
they attempt, as with every department head, to find different ways to do revenue. That's why they came to you, for instance, on Spin City and said, here's a market review of the rates that we charge versus what others are charging. We think we can be more profitable based on, and still have a competitive price if you'll allow us to increase the rates. And that's what you did. And so that's what we're looking at on golf, as well as Spin City, as well as all of those. It's not just about expenditures. It's also being market competitive and market comparable to what others do for revenue.
Exactly.
There are other revenue sources as listed on that list that we could be doing. Sunday liquor sales. What was some of them? Sunday, there's just a whole bunch of different ways you can increase revenue as well that is normal practice in other cities. When I arrived here, we weren't doing a lot of things that normal cities did for revenue and expenditures. And we've tried to be as transparent as well as realign the expenditures so that you could easily see what it costs you to run a particular department. And so that you could do comparables to other cities and know where the money's at, where it's coming in and where it's going out. Those are all the things that we've done in the last 4 years.
What my comments were too was the $4,000 increase from last year in May of 2013 to May of 2014. June it was a $2,000, and July was roughly $1,000.
Right.
Those were numbers I was referring to.
Okay. Yeah.
I wasn't bringing them off the top.
Yeah,
of my head.
I know you're probably, but I can't.
I know.
I see a lot of numbers every day, so
I got you.
I'm not going to stand here and swear I know them all.
I got you. Thank
Because
you.
I don't.
I'm going to move to accept the budget as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the budget as presented. Is there any further discussion?
I had one other item that I wanted to mention in reference to the 2015 budget. Overtime is a big ticket item, and I know that there's times that we just can't avoid overtime, whether it's short of staff or staff in training or staff out on sick leave or whatever it may be. But I think one of the focus areas and part of the reporting that you're doing now will indicate and it will show trends on overtime, and I really appreciate that report because I'm going to be looking at that extensively to try and figure out trends, and then to ask city and staff what these trends may be caused by and what mitigation we may be able to do. And I think that's a big expense that we do need to focus on. Not that it's not focused on now, but that is an area that I think we can focus on.
And I can tell you right now that the police department overtime is probably the lowest in the state for the size of the department. But most of that is due to Sundown Salute, and you would have to choose whether or not you're going to continue to support Sundown Salute in that manner. In addition, we've challenged the municipal service hours. Remember, asked you for doubling their overtime, and I said no, and you backed me on that. And we said no, you need to manage your overtime, and maybe the streets don't get plowed the first 2 hours. Maybe it'll be 4 hours later. They won't get us done as fast, but that we're not going to allow the overtime, and that's a challenge back to the department heads, is that you have to constantly look at that.
Okay.
And although you want to provide the 100% quality services, maybe it's only at 90 or 95% instead.
That is correct.
So that, because we have to be physically responsible in addition to providing high-quality services, they do go hand in hand.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. And we did challenge the departments back on that.
Was there any further discussion?
None.
All in favor We have the motion to approve the budget as presented. Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Passed 5-0. Next item will be consideration of approval of G 1151 incorporating by reference the standard traffic ordinance for Kansas cities.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Krista Blaisdell, City Prosecutor. Before you this evening is a pretty standard annual ordinance that I present before the Commission every year. It's for the adoption of the 2014 Standard Traffic Ordinances prepared by the League of Municipalities. It's a book that they do every year. It kind of seems weird to be halfway through 2014 and just now be adopting it, but because of the way the legislature works with July 1st dates and January 1st dates, it's when it gets published is in July, so that's why it comes to you about August when we actually get them in from being ordered. So basically it keeps us current with state law. The League of Municipalities prepares this book for cities to adopt instead of me having to go through and write 200 and actually probably ends up being about 215, 220 traffic ordinances. They put it in a nice little book for us so that I can present to you in one ordinance for the commission to adopt with that. We've previously kept current with all of that. There's no significant changes this year as far as any laws go that would stand out or the public would probably need to be made aware of. Everything stayed pretty consistent. I will, for the commission's knowledge, let you know that Ms. Logan advised that apparently there are a couple typos this year within the actual book. I don't think that either of them are substantial enough to affect the law or the applicability of the law that we do on a regular basis here. If for some reason I think that it would become a problem or there'd be some issue raised, I could come back before the commission with an advice, basically an amending ordinance that would say, hey, we didn't make these typo corrections, and ask for the commission's approval at that point. But I don't see where there's any glaring issues where it would affect the ability to enforce any of the traffic laws. So it's a pretty standard, like I said, annual ordinance I bring before the commission each year to repeal the previous year's 2013 and adopt the 2014 STOs. Feel free to answer any questions.
So no major changes, right?
No major changes. I think they kind of cleared up the, there was some
Last year.
with accidents, with accident reporting, there were a couple repetitive things, so they kind of cleaned out some of the repetitive sections in there and just kind of held them. So actually it'll make our jobs a lot easier on our side. But as far as any significant DUI law changes or things that you typically see with that, no, there hasn't been any significant changes this year.
Thank you.
I'd move to approve ordinance G 1151.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve G 1151. Is there any further discussion?
None here.
All in favor, say
Roll
aye.
call.
Roll call.
Oh, yeah.
Roll call.
Commissioner Landis?
Yes.
Commissioner Aska?
Yes.
Mayor Ryan?
Yes.
Commissioner McAllister?
Yes.
Commissioner Sands?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next item is consideration of ordinance G 1152.
Okay, this item goes somewhat hand in hand with the next item, which is the franchise ordinance with Idea Tech. We had a presentation in early August about this newer technology called the DAS systems, distributed antenna systems, which is, my understanding is it is intended to be a less intrusive method of providing wireless service coverage within communities or on private property or in the public right-of-way. It's an alternative, less intrusive in part because it's an alternative to larger cell towers and that sort of thing. And because this technology is, it's not brand new, but it's fairly new, in looking at the right-of-way ordinances of the city, I felt that there were some provisions that we would like to see in the right-of-way ordinance, just the general code for governing the right-of-way, that relate to this kind of technology that really wasn't in there. And I looked not only at other cities close by, but really other cities around the state to pick and kind of choose provisions that I thought I wanted to recommend to, well, first to city staff and then ultimately to the governing body to basically provide more control. The city always has control over its public right-of-way, but to provide more control as to the installation of these particular systems. So that is what the purpose of this ordinance is. It adds, it doesn't change the existing right-of-way code, which is very comprehensive, and we actually Greg McCaffrey had actually drafted quite a comprehensive amendment of that just a couple of years ago.
Right.
This simply adds another section that specifically talks about wireless communications facilities in the right-of-way. Everything else in the right-of-way code applies. This just adds more kind of bells and whistles to the restrictions and city's ability to regulate these particular facilities in the public right-of-way. In terms of Ms. Johnson's question about whether or not other utilities are affected by this, they shouldn't be, any more so than if Westar came in and said, we're going to put some more lights in your right-of-way. That isn't supposed to affect other utilities in the right-of-way. And if, in fact, a public utility requests for permission to use the right-of-way, and frankly, in the case of wireless communications, you have to let them, under both federal and state law, have access to the public right-of-way. Legally, you can't say no. You can only say yes and impose reasonable conditions on that. But in any event, any damage that might be done to the public right-of-way by a utility coming in later has to be corrected at their expense. So it shouldn't create any cost to any existing utilities. Staff, this was looked at by staff. It was commented on by city staff, and it's in a form that we would all recommend approval. It's budget neutral, just to provide the city more protections. So we would recommend approval.
Were there any questions?
I had two. Item 8.4 on page 107 talks to the interest paid for late payment.
This is, you're on the wrong ordinance, because I'm on
That's the next one.
I'm on the right-of-way
We're on the right-of-way one.
ordinance.
Okay, we're good, I'll save it.
Getting ahead of yourself.
I was just trying to get done.
Don't blame you there.
I move to approve ordinance G 1152 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance as presented. Any further discussion?
None here.
Tyler?
Oh, it's a roll call vote. Commissioner Landis?
Yes.
Commissioner Aska?
Yes.
Mayor Ryan?
Yes.
Commissioner McAllister?
Yes.
Commissioner Sands?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next item, the next item is the consideration of ordinance G 1153. This is a franchise ordinance granting to Idea Tech Telecom LLC, a wholly owned subsidiary of iTech Systems Inc., a franchise to construct, operate, and maintain a local exchange service and infrastructure facilities for the provision of wireless telecommunications systems in the city. Idea Tech is a company that is both a local exchange provider in the state of Kansas. The local exchange provider is really your local telephone company. And it also, in this case, its most immediate request of the city is to act as a provider of facilities for other providers in the city. It's called a competitive infrastructure provider, and that is the DAS systems. Because Idea Tech is both a local exchange provider and a competitive infrastructure provider, and because some of the infrastructure that they would put in connection with the DAS systems could also be used to provide local exchange service in the city, even though my impression is they don't have any immediate intentions of providing that as well. They're asking, and in effect, once again, under state law and federal law, the city is required to give them access to the right-of-way for both purposes. There are statutes in Kansas that govern the ability of cities to regulate the right-of-way for telecommunications services. And there's a great big huge federal act called the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1995 that very much, and particularly in the case of wireless facilities, restrict the city's ability to just simply say no. So at the end of the day, you have to provide them with access to the right-of-way. You can regulate it, subject to certain restrictions, and based on a great deal of time that I spent on this particular franchise agreement, because it's different than any franchise agreements the city has now because of the DAS system, in consultation with city attorneys in both Salina and Manhattan. This is the culmination of my very lengthy negotiations with Idea Tech, and I believe it protects the city. In all ways, I can protect you. You can't say no, but I don't know that you want to say no because, again, these facilities provide wireless service coverage within the city. They're intended to provide wireless service coverage in areas where you have gaps because you don't have telecommunication towers. The franchise agreement allows them access to the right-of-way in accordance with the right-of-way provisions, and it also authorizes the city to collect a franchise fee. And there are two franchise fees that are proposed in this ordinance. One is a franchise fee of 5% of the DAS revenues, the revenues from the DAS facilities. The revenues from the DAS facilities are rental revenues that this company charges to wireless carriers like Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, all those. They charge a fee which we don't. That's their agreement with the wireless provider, and whatever their revenues are off of that, the city gets 5% of that. Now, whether or not Verizon or AT&T or Sprint in turn can pass that through, I don't know. I doubt it. I don't know. But that's really, we have the opportunity to make the revenue from the DAS revenues. So that is built in here. It's standard. All of our current franchise agreements with wireless providers, which is really Sprint, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Sprint and Unite, which doesn't have any telecommunications revenue yet. They're all 5%, and 5% is standard. Most cities I know of are 5%. I've seen both competitive infrastructure provider agreements in other Kansas cities, not with Idea Tech, but with other companies. There are other companies that do this. And also just general local exchange carrier franchise ordinances, and I've never seen one where less than 5%. I'm not saying there aren't any, but 5% is the standard. The other fee that we are, that the company offered and we're taking advantage of is they're also offering, in addition to any of the right-of-way permit fees that the city charges, and that's already established and separate. So for each facility they put in, and they're estimating up to 30, they would have to pay the standard right-of-way access fee and all of that. They're also offering to pay $1,000 per installation. They described that as sort of an incentive to get this moving quickly. They offered it in Wichita and other cities, so that's potentially another $30,000 worth of revenue, one-time revenue, under this agreement. In the way, a lot of it is just standard franchise agreement format where, cities always reserve, where we have a provider of Public Services that has a franchise with the city, they calculate and send us the, revenue information and fees periodically. We always retain, quarterly, and this is quarterly, and we retain the right to audit them, if we want to. All of that is standard and across the board, that aspect of it. And frankly, we can't treat them any differently than we treat anybody else. So we have to treat them all uniformly. So I can't put provisions in here that are more restrictive than, for example, the provisions we have with Unite or Sprint. I can't under law. These agreements have to be competitively neutral. So you have to treat everybody the same. So they have to provide the insurance and all of, indemnities, bonds for work in the right-of-way, all of those things.
Same as we ask for everybody else.
Yes, same as everybody else.
I'm looking at this map, and I think I count like 24, I assume,
There's 24.
Ms. Drogi from Idea Tech
they're
is
gonna be
here.
at-
And
So does this agreement allow for additional?
yes, it does. If your question is yes. This agreement does not limit, and we can't legally limit. However, having said that, I will say that the city's approval ability relates to, for the placement of a particular, if it has to be, for example, a new pole with an antenna on top of it, we can take into account what other poles or things in the right-of-way are nearby, and for both public safety and aesthetic purposes, take those issues into account. Go ahead.
For instance, we would never allow one to be built in the traffic triangle on the corner, things of that nature, if that's a safety issue.
And specifically to your question, Commissioner, currently we're looking at 25 in Junction City and 2 in Grandview Plaza, from the propagation maps that we've been provided thus far.
This takes care of some of the dead zone spots around the town for cellular use.
But there's none on the west side.
What's that?
There's none on the west side.
Well, the carrier kind of sets where they need the antennas based upon the propagation maps and where they see capacity and coverage issues.
I'm fine with having my phone calls dropped.
It's strategic, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Now, the agreement agrees up to 40.
No, it's just that the 40 doesn't designate how many, it designates how many they'll pay the $1,000 fee for.
Okay.
And and the company offered it. In Wichita, it was a larger number, obviously a much larger city, and that was just part of the kind of the carrot, at least as it was explained to me. They were dangling to get this run through quickly. So they just estimated the number they would need and then agreed to pay this $1,000 fee per up to that number. But that doesn't mean they couldn't put more in. It just means if they did, we wouldn't get the $1,000. So, we put some cushion in there. So.
The idea there is we had to pay attorney fees to get this all done and drafted, and staff has to set up systems and get used to their systems and working together, and that all takes time and money. And so it's offsetting, the idea of it is to offset those costs so that it becomes tax neutral to the taxpayers.
So I know, maybe you can say, but I know at least Wichita, Salina, McPherson.
Correct.
And it's pending in
Manhattan.
pending in Manhattan right now.
Yeah, it's pending in Manhattan.
Kansas City, you have
Liberal, it's gone through. It's pending in Pittsburgh. Hutch, I think it's still pending there. I'm not sure it's finalized there.
There's several different companies in Kansas City.
Yeah, we have different companies. There are quite a few of them up in Johnson
Kansas City
County,
area.
but it's a different carrier.
This 5%, how much do we expect to generate from that?
We don't know. Do
We
we?
don't know.
Yeah, with each location, it's slightly different of the maintenance fees that we charge for the small cells that go up.
Do you
So
have a projection
I
for
don't
this?
have that projection with me. I apologize.
And because we don't know, it's not budgeted in the 2015 budget. So we will budget, later, starting 2016-17, when we get a feel for what that's going to be and a revenue source.
I can tell you that, kind of the total overall monthly maintenance fee, but to break it out specifically to Junction City, I don't have that with me.
That's good. Okay. I move to approve ordinance G 1153 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve G 1153. Is there any further discussion? Tyler?
Commissioner Landis?
Yes.
Commissioner Sands?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner. Mayor Ryan? Yes, yes.
Yes.
Struggling tonight.
McAllister?
Boy, I got a comment for that. Yes.
I think that's everybody. Motion carries.
Needs a 5-hour energy.
We both wear glasses and he got you.
I'll be ready for the next one.
Okay.
Poor Tyler.
I was just trying to make sure you're up to over here.
Next item would be consideration and approval of awarded bid for the police department headquarters of the re-roof project. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Appreciate you allowing me to come before you tonight. We're here tonight for the consideration and approval of a request for bid for the re-roofing project for the police department headquarters. The police department's roof was installed when the building was built, I think 1989, 1990. So we're talking an almost 24, 25-year-old roof. We have started to see some failures in the roof. We've had some leaks. I've got a pretty good-sized water spot in my office on my wall. So we, this year, in the 2014 budget process, we, based on an estimate from a contractor that came out and looked at it, we budgeted $70,000. We went out for RFBs. We direct solicited a number of commercial roofing firms based on Mark Carmen's recommendation, Greg McCaffrey's recommendations. Danker Roofing, Flint Hills Roofing, Geisler Roofing, GTL Roofing, and Superior Roofing all were direct solicited in this. The bids were let out, and their opening date was July 18, 2014 at 3 p.m. On that particular day, we received 3 bids. Bloyer & Sons and Company for $49,865, Geisler Roofing and Home Improvement $59,000, and Danker Roofing and Company $53,094. We felt it was necessary that we look at these bids to ensure they met industry standards. We hired Deem & Deem Architecture to vet these bids, review them, check out the qualifications of these companies involved. And it was, as you will see in the enclosed letter, the recommendation of Mr. Dean to go with the low bidder, Bloyer & Sons and Company, with the $49,865 bid. This, they met the qualifications plus the specifications that they set forth, met what he believed are industry standards, and therefore he was satisfied that they would do a good job for us, and he also checked out their references and so on. So we are asking that you approve the Bloyer & Sons bid at $49,865 for the re-roofing project of the Junction City Police Department headquarters.
So you did not direct solicit them, but they...
No, I got a call from some guy that kind of, and I don't know who he is, I guess he looks for jobs for roofing companies, and he asked if how to go about getting a bid package, and I told him, and next thing I know, when we opened up, Bloyer & Son was not one I had direct solicited, no. In fact, I didn't know they existed. I think they're out of
Wakefield, I think, Milford, Wakefield.
I'd have to look, hold on a minute.
Any project over $10,000,
Right.
we advertise in the newspaper.
It was in the newspaper, and and we sent packets to all the ones that bid. Bloyer & Son is out of Winfield. That's correct. Thank you. But Mr. Dean was confident that they could do the job for us at quite a reduced price than what we budgeted. That's a $20,000 savings. So we would recommend that approval.
just curious, the current roof, is it a modified bit roof? Or is it an EPDM?
Sir, I don't know.
Okay.
I can't answer that question for you. Bruce? He was in on designing that building.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but you have some.
He knows that.
Yeah, he knows the building well.
Commissioner, the police chief is correct. It was a 1989, 1990 installation. It should probably still be the original roof that is on the building. It is a single ply membrane. I do recall that. It is not a built-up tar and gravel, but it is a single ply membrane that's on the building.
And it's lasted 25 years?
Yes.
Okay.
And it is our intention to install a new membrane on that, sir.
Right.
That's our intention.
Okay.
This is a good example of why we haven't been able to drop the mill levy, so that the public knows. We have major projects out there that where we've made them last well beyond their life, and we just can't put them off anymore. But we're still doing it within the challenge.
I'll move to approve the awarded bid to Boyer and Sons Incorporated, not to exceed $49,865.
Second.
For re-roofing project.
We have a motion and a second to approve the roofing project. Is there any further discussion?
None here.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it, 5-0.
Thanks for
Thank you,
taking
Mayor,
Tyler out of the
Commissioners.
mix.
The next item will be consideration of contract with Cheney Construction for the 701 North Jefferson renovation and expansion project.
Mayor and Commissioners, at the last meeting, the commission awarded bid for the 701 North Jefferson renovation expansion project to Cheney Construction. The amount, as you can see on the memo, is in the amount of $919,382. That includes the 4 addendum that were included in that, and it's the amount that was approved by the commission. We received from our architect the contract, the bond documents, and the insurance documents provided by Cheney Construction. They're attached. If you have any questions for myself or Mr. McMillan, I'd be happy to try to answer those. The amended amount, not the amended amount, but the amended document that I provided was feedback that we received from City Attorney Logan's.
Right. In section 3.3, the language that had been inserted in, see where there's a kind of a mark next to some added language. The language that had been inserted talked about penalties, and under Kansas law, you run into problems when you try to collect things that are called penalties. It's better to call them liquidated damages. So one of my partners who reviews AIA contracts all the time substituted some language so that if this provision kicks in, hopefully it won't, they wouldn't have a defense arguing it's a penalty and you can't collect it. So it's not intended to be substantively different. It's just intended to have the correct legal language in it.
Yes.
Is $100 too small?
I think that's for the architect.
'Cause I'd pay that to my wife for those projects she has for me.
Just to get it.
Just to have more
An
time
extra
to get
day.
it done.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Bruce Millen, 332 West 7th Street, Junction City. Garrick Baker and I are both here this evening to answer any questions you might have. With respect to the $100 amount, Commissioner, that is the amount that was stated in the project specifications that were placed to bid. And so that was why this amount was actually inserted into the contract.
Yeah, I figured that had to be the case.
And so I don't know the legal ramifications of changing that amount at this time.
Oh, I don't think you could. If
Yeah.
if you specified that as part of the bid, and maybe a higher amount should have been used, but that was the amount that was
If you tend to get that too high, then what it does is increase the price of the project.
It
Founders-
can backfire,
I
yes.
bring it
backfire.
up because we had such conversation about the
I know.
whole timeline thing, so,
Yeah.
you know, so we're holding your foot, so.
We're gonna hold their foot to the fire.
Does the contractor have to have a building or a contractor's license here in our town to do work here?
Yes, and they will have to pay. For
They would have to obtain, if they do not currently, they have done work in Junction City before.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that it is still in existence, but if not, then they will need to have a license obtained, yes.
We'll review all of that with them when we meet with them, but they know our procedure. They've done work in Junction City before. They'll have to be bonded just like all other contractors are.
There's a pre-construction meeting scheduled for this Friday afternoon. Those issues will be further defined.
Mr. McMillan, I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Reference to unforeseen site conditions. My understanding is there were site borings taken.
We had soil borings taken in, I believe, three locations on the property, and basically to check for any residual materials, because there were buildings on that entire site, we believe, previously, and that's many years ago, though, sir. And the soil borings came back as far as proper soil capacity, as well as there was no deleterious material that was found in those borings, as far as we know at this point. Call Valley Engineering coordinated those borings for us.
And there's no basement on this project, so
No,
footings are not going to go down.
they'll be somewhere in the 36 inches below grade.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have.
Were there any other questions?
Nothing here. I move to approve the contract as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the contract as presented. Is there any further discussion?
None
Still want to raise my concern about the overall cost of this project. It's so far below the other bidders. I have grave concerns about the quality that's going to take place, quality of the subcontractors, quality of the materials, and staff time that's going to have to oversee this to make sure it's done the right way, because it is so below the other contractors. I'm really concerned about that. So that's all I have.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Now we'll move into commissioner comments. Commissioner Sands.
Couple meetings attended today, since the last one, but today was the CVB. And CVB had a great event this past weekend, Float Your Boat. Folks from neighboring states, Missouri, Iowa, I think Nebraska, Oklahoma, came in for the Float Your Boat. It was probably reduced in size, but not in the competition. Great support, great show of spirit. Several hundred people were out at the lake, and the location changed to the gathering pond. But CVB did a great job. The Starship Enterprise was probably one of the best ones that was out there, and it floated and it raced and it even placed. So I thought that was a great event. An item came up today about the CVB writing, and not so much their writing campaign, but the community writing campaign for Fort Riley that needs to be written to the government. They're receiving some, but the more that we can write and submit, and not just say we want Fort Riley to stay here. Let them know this is a community, out of my 30 years of service, this is one of the best communities I've ever been in for accepting soldiers and military, and it's one of the reasons I stayed here. I've been all over the country, and one of the best neighboring communities to a military installation is Fort Riley. That's why so many of us, it's Junction City, that's why so many of us retire here. And let them know that in D.C. Let them know that at the Pentagon, because the Pentagon, Department of Defense are the ones going to be making those decisions. They need to hear from the public that soldiers are welcome here and this is their home. September 5th, and this is from the CVB meeting also, it starts the State Fair in Hutchinson. Our Convention and Visitors Bureau will be there from the 5th to the 14th, and if you want to go up and volunteer, they are looking for volunteers, but we're actually okay with the community support. But if you're up in Hutchinson or you haven't been there for the State Fair, stop in. You can also visit the Space Museum and the salt mines down underneath the ground there and several other things. We have, again, with the CVB, they had a gentleman came out from Kansas City. He's writing an article now, him and along with some of the other Kansas outdoor writers. He wanted to come down and talk about bass. Instead of talking about bass, they went out and fished. And in about 2 hours, he caught 50 bass. They're bringing the Kansas Outdoor Writers Association to Milford Lake in November, and this will be a week before Thanksgiving. So we do have a great place. We just got to make sure that we stay positive. There's so many people down talking that think of the glass as half full rather than half empty. Friday also at 11:30, the Military Outlet grand reopening and ribbon cutting ceremony will start at their new location. It'll be at 11:30. Come by, help them cut the ribbon. Just come by and help them say welcome them to the area. Even though they got burned out, they're at a new location. They're happy. They want to stay there. We also talked about the status of Sundown. They gave us a report back on Sundown Salute. Sundown Salute was a great event. The carnival that we had, probably one of the best carnivals they've had before. They said that they were so interested and received so much support from the community. They're interested in coming back, and we're pretty much going to try and make sure that they do come back. They did a great job, great rides. Their ideas for the ATMs was a great idea. So we probably need to expand that, and we're looking at how we can do that for also a moneymaker, because people need money at the fair. At the Sundown Salute. I haven't heard the status of our water restrictions, but I figure with the last 2 nights, we should be pretty well off on water restrictions. And City Manager, is there any warning or watch?
It will continue with the water watch because we still are exceeding daily counts.
Okay. And one last thing, I know there's been a lot of talk. I even spoke with a couple of people. I spoke with the chief of police, but I've had more folks approach me. So I'm going to just kind of hold a meeting, and one of the county commissioners, Commissioner Hicks, and I are going to meet with the public next Wednesday at the library. If you have some issues, come out and talk to us. But we want you to know that as a city commissioner, we're interested in what your concerns are. And some of the concerns we have, we don't need you to go to Missouri. Missouri's got enough going on there right now. Express your concerns to us, and we'll express to you things that you don't know that you may need to know, so that you don't make that trip and you don't start something else like that here. But we're going to meet at the library at 6 o'clock. It's open. There'll be no food, no drinks, unless somebody wants to bring some. But I want to make sure those issues that you have, that you're thinking about, I want to hear them. So I'll be there, and if any of my fellow commissioners choose to attend, you can, but it will be at the library at 6 o'clock. Mr. Mayor, that's everything I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner's hands. Commissioner McAllister.
I had several comments, but probably the overarching comment that I wanted to speak about tonight was the Geary County mill levy. That is very scary. I know it's a very hard, difficult thing to do. Based on what we've done here at the city level, sacrifices have to be made. 7.3 is a huge amount, and I know to get under that, we're looking at services in the county to be cut, and folks hate to see services cut or cut back on, but I think I think as a governing body, we need to work together to try and find those areas that we can cut. And services may be one of them. It's a very difficult job for 3 commissioners to look at the amount of data that they have to look at. We in the city have the luxury of staff, the city manager, and all the folks pulling together as a team to talk about things and to vet expenses, where we can cut and where we can't cut, and what services we can cut back on. I'd really like to see the county have some kind of help, some kind of administrator that could gather all that information, that could do the research, and be able to talk about serious cuts. I know when we drew a line in the sand a couple of years ago, city and staff took it serious, and they really did know where they were, know how far they could go, and they've been towing that line for the past 5 years because of those requirements. I'd really like to see the county put those requirements out and say, this is your budget, this is your number, that's what you have to work toward. If services need to be cut, then services need to be cut. Counties are doing it all over Kansas. Topeka recently said, here's your number, and you can't go any further than that. And so as a team, they work together to get to that number. And I think that's what we do in the city, and I hope the county is able to do that as well. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Aska.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Landis.
Just a couple things. I'd like to reiterate what Commissioner Sands said, that it's very important that the public emails or writes letters to the Army. The Chamber of Commerce website has all that contact information. They have a sample letter right there. Basically, it's point and click. You can drag the whole letter down to your own email. And I sent off over 125 of those on Sunday myself, so it can be done. I was going to ask Ms. Logan if sometime she might do a little review for the commissioners on voting responsibilities and things like that for the commissioners
Ready to
sometime.
talk about
We're
that
going to
tonight.
talk about that during staff
Perfect.
comments.
That's great. County commissioners have a tough job, as we know. They're actually paid substantially for their position, even though they don't have an administrator. They are the administrators. They have the ability to make those cuts and do that research themselves, because that is a full-time job for them. I mean, we're just part-timers and that kind of thing here, and we're very fortunate to have highly dedicated city staff that does a great job for us doing research and answering questions and posing questions to see what we can do to figure out and solve problems. If you got to figure out a way to get it down, because it's just not going to work. We're all walking a thin line here as it is, and I know we've probably caused the county commissioners some heartburn regarding the health department takeover, but that was by state statute. So, and it's a shared cost for the entire county, instead of city residents getting hit twice between city taxes to pay for it and county taxes to pay for it. So that was really a fair thing to do for all in our county. That's really all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you guys for all your comments. The letter writing campaign is important. I sent another one out today myself.
Just one?
Well, I was lazy, I guess. Compared to 125, I was way lazy.
Yeah, I'm going to have
that long, really.
to pick up a notch.
But I want to thank the city staff for all the hard work that you've done through this budget process. And I know it's not easy because I've sat in your chair before, but being able to hold the budget pretty much steady and still put an extra almost 600,000 in streets is a good thing. So, thank you. Ms. Beatty.
Okay, I'm working on a, just so you're aware, of Standard & Poor's review right now, and just with discussion with the reviewer today, he does relay the message. He is impressed with what we've done in Junction City, and they're doing the review because there were some law changes on government ratings, and so they're looking at all government re-rating all the government agencies, and ours is just now coming up, so they'll be doing another review. I'll be working with Jeff White with Columbia Capital to make sure that we have all the right responses and answer the questions properly, and we'll get a result of that in a few months, 2 or 3 months, I would imagine. Other than wrapping up the budget, we're working with EDC on a couple more economic development projects. Another one that may bring another employer to town and possibly sell one of our facilities. So those are the kinds of things that we're working on right now. And as far as your question, Pat, I asked Katie to give us a review on voting, the responsibility of the commission. So I'm going to turn that over to her.
Okay. So under Kansas law, there is no affirmative obligation of a member of a governing body to vote on matters, although it is recommended as good governance practice for the city code, which ours doesn't have this in it, but for the city code to impose an affirmative obligation on all members of the governing body to vote, unless they have a reason to abstain, which is, a reason because of conflict of interest or something, that prevents them from either an actual conflict of interest, which I'll talk about in a minute under state law or your local code, or you may, it's appropriate to abstain if you don't have a technical conflict of interest, if you just feel that you want to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest. It's also appropriate to abstain under those situations. But otherwise, even though the Kansas statutes don't say you have to vote on every item, it's a good governance practice to do so. I want to talk for a minute about the effect of abstaining, because I think people don't realize that by abstaining, their vote under Kansas law, except ordinances, that's separate, and I'll talk about that separately, but for every other vote you take as a member of the governing body, if you abstain other than for the actual conflict of interest statute that prevents you from voting, which in Pat's case would have been last week, your vote counts with the majority. So even though you abstain, your vote counts with the majority. So if the vote is a negative vote, your vote would count with the negative. And if the outcome is positive, your vote counts with the positive. And one of the reasons for that is to encourage you to actually vote. So, you have expressed your vote as opposed to having it just go whichever way the outcome goes. With ordinances, though, ordinances are treated differently by Kansas statute. With ordinances, if you abstain, your vote, let me put it a different way. Ordinances have to be approved by the affirmative vote of a majority of the governing body, in some cases, a supermajority of the governing body. And if you abstain, your vote does not count as an affirmative vote. By abstaining, you can, in effect, prevent something from passing. And that, is the practice there is that if you're going to affect the outcome, you should vote unless you have a valid reason for not voting. But if you are going to abstain for some reason, you really have to abstain at the very beginning of when that item comes up. You can't and you know, this has happened before and I haven't really drawn it to everybody's attention, but you can't have it both ways. You can't participate in the discussion and then refrain from voting. You have to abstain. I mean, you know, I don't really invoke this, but you have to recuse yourself from participating in any way in the discussion. You can stay at the bench. Some cities say you have to actually, you know, go sit in the audience, but as long as you're sitting there and not participating. But if you're going to abstain, you really have to abstain at the very beginning when that item comes up.
And not participate in the conversation.
Yes. So you're basically doing two things. You're recusing yourself from any part of the discussion, and then, of course, you're abstaining from voting. And you need to announce it up front. And when you do abstain, you should really also, well, you're really required to state the reason for abstaining.
You have a conflict, either perceived or
Or
real.
Yeah. And it's not inappropriate to abstain if you don't have what's technically called a conflict under Kansas law, which are measured by the value of interest you might have in a company or, you know, certain other things, certain other interests you might have in companies. But you may have enough of an interest or even a relationship with someone or some you know, reason to abstain. And when you read all of the Ethics Commission opinions, there is a separate Kansas Ethics Commission that issues opinions on these matters. They will always say that even if it's not technically a substantial interest, they'll recommend that if it's even some interest, you should abstain.
I had a commission once where it was a landscaping business. She worked for the landscaping business, and in addition, the owner of that landscaping business was her father. Now, she technically did not have to abstain because she was not going to benefit personally from, this is what the attorney told her, she was not going to benefit personally from it, but she was not comfortable participating in the vote to award a contract to her father. Because she was just an employee. She received an hourly wage. She wasn't going to benefit from the contract. So he ruled that she could vote. Well, she wasn't comfortable voting, so she abstained for that reason.
So those are the general rules. And I know that Tyler brought up that there is a model, some model administrative provisions that the League of Kansas Municipalities put out that if you wanted to adopt it, we'd have to adopt your administrative code, amend it, but you can
Right now,
talk
we
about
operate
it.
under Robert's Rules of Order, which is really set up for a much larger parliamentary system. This is...
The Code of Procedure is recommended, the League recommends that you don't run by Robert's Rule of Order, you run by what they have adopted by reference, the Code of Procedures. And we could place this on an agenda for further conversation and give you the copy of it. And it's not very long. It's just a very short document that gives you a basic structure for conducting your business at your meetings. What they say about vote in here, and I just had it and then I flipped it. Okay. It talks about duty to vote. Members of a governing body have a duty to vote unless such member choosing to abstain has a conflict of interest or other conflict that appears to make the voting of an issue improper. Any member who abstains must state, for the purpose of the inclusion of the minutes, the reason for the abstention. So that it just simplifies it, so you understand more about what you're doing as a commissioner. And that's what this does, and every city that I've worked, we eventually have adopted this. The League recommends, when you go to your League meetings, they'll recommend that you adopt this, rather than follow Robert's Rule, which is complicated, difficult to understand, difficult to follow. And this is just a simple code of conduct. So I can put it on a future agenda if you're interested.
Yes, we ought to
Okay,
look at it.
we'll put it on a future agenda.
I can scan that and send it out to you tomorrow
Yeah.
if you like.
It's a simple, it just simplifies everything.
Are there any questions?
That's perfect.
Is that what you wanted?
Yeah.
To clear understanding so that you understand what abstention is and what it means?
I had a quick question about, recording it, record it in the minutes. It's an abstention, so basically it's not a vote, so should it be included in the minutes if they don't take? Because what I did previously is I listed them as an abstention.
And he did not count them.
It's not a vote, so
Well,
would you just not write their name
so-
down because there was no vote, or do you list it as an abstention?
I think you would you definitely list it as an abstention.
Okay.
And then depending on the outcome, you can say, the abstention counts as a vote with the prevailing side.
Would have discussed
But if it's
earlier
an
in the
ordinance,
minutes.
it doesn't.
No.
So, I can talk to you about how to have that reflected in the minutes.
Because we had not been reflecting it one way or the other.
Oh,
We
it
just-
should definitely be
There
reflected.
hasn't,
Which
there
is what I
wasn't
was concerned about.
any discussion about abstentions earlier, so it wasn't really discussed. So if someone went back and looked at it at a later time and you just didn't have the person on there, you wouldn't know what happened.
So if it's a 2-2 vote with an abstention, it's still a tie, period, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Because
But
there
if
is
it's-
no majority.
Because there is no prevailing side.
Right.
But where it could make a difference would be if you had a zoning matter that required 4 affirmative votes to pass, and you had 3 affirmative votes, 1 no, and 1 abstention. Well, actually, I take that back.
Because that's an ordinance.
That's an ordinance, so it wouldn't count towards.
But if it was a
the
award of a
affirmative.
contract, for instance. Well, that
but
wouldn't
the
be 3-1.
Yeah. It's interesting because all those possibilities of when it might make a difference, those change with the number of the governing body you have.
Right.
For a small governing body, it often doesn't make any difference, but if you get into a larger governing body, it could.
If the
Has there
vote,
been an issue?
well, there was a concern of whether we were recording it properly, number one. And number two is that we were holding, that some of you that have abstained are discussing it and being a part of the discussion, and that we really
And
shouldn't.
abstaining at
And
the
abstaining at the end, and that shouldn't be happening. We
Right.
weren't doing it properly.
Okay.
It was brought to our attention that if you're going to abstain, you need to, if
abstain
it
up
comes
front
up
and
front.
not participate.
Item
not
2 on the
participate.
agenda, you need to say right up front, I'm abstaining from this vote, and this is my reason why, and then you don't get to participate in the conversation, and that was what was brought to our attention.
Okay.
So we were doing it wrong after long discussion with her about it. So that was the correction we need to bring to your attention, was that if you're going to abstain, you got to do it up front, and you don't talk. You don't get to participate in any conversation, and that's so that you don't influence the vote.
And from a governance standpoint, you're really elected to make decisions. So unless you have a good reason for abstaining, you really shouldn't. That's
And you need to
not-
state the reason why
That's
you're
not a
abstaining.
state law, it's just good governance, that you really have a duty.
Not because you don't want to, but you gotta have a real reason not to vote.
Right. You have to have really a conflict
Can't just
or,
bow out the last minute.
You can't just say, I don't feel like voting on that.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Ficken, did you have anything?
No comments.
Chief?
No, sir, thank you.
Chief? Eddie? Mr. Jim?
Nothing, sir.
I think we have a new fire truck, don't we?
They will present it at the next
Apparatus?
meeting.
All right, good.
drive it in.
Not inside. We'll have it parked out front for you to look at. So when you come, you can come a few minutes early. Well, you'll be here. Maybe we can get in between the land bank meeting and
Luck with
the
that.
regular meeting.
Yeah,
Go
good luck
outside
with
and-
that.
It is a nice truck. I looked at it this afternoon.
The two of the front-end loaders have arrived as well. I just have to finalize the financing on them, but they have arrived as well.
We can do work.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.